Welcome to It Matters, where we cut through the noise and dive deep into the issues that really shape our world. This isn't just another political podcast. This is where we call out the lies, expose the corruption, and challenge the status quo. Whether it's dissecting the latest political circus or spotlighting the real heroes fighting for justice, we're here to give you the unfiltered truth. So buckle up. It's time to get real, get informed, and get ready to be honest. This is It Matters. All right, we've got another great guest this week. Former sports reporter, former news reporter, entrepreneur, and friend, Jillian Mele. How are you?
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here. How are you?
I'm good. I can't complain. Just, trying to be like you, be an entrepreneur, start new projects, build things up.
I hope you're prepared then for the blood, sweat, and tears and sleepless nights and everything that goes along with it. No, I make it sound so negative. It's just a lot of work, right?
It's a lot of work. And I don't think people realize, and like myself included, just how much of the other stuff you're going to have to do. Like you focus on the main project, like the podcast. But then it's all the other things, the editing, the social media, the booking, just everything that it takes just to get one episode out.
It's so much work. But here's the thing. It's so rewarding. You and I have made similar sort of transitions in life where we're doing our own thing and in this entrepreneurial world and utilizing our voices and things like that. And that's great. So I love the rewards that come along with it. All the back end work is what they don't warn you about.
They really don't. What made you want to, kind of become an entrepreneur? Is that something you were kind of into as a kid?
It was never in the cards for me. It was never even in my brain, like not even tucked away in the back of the brain. It was just never there, like never entered my mind. My dad had his own business, so we had entrepreneurship in the family, but it was just not something I saw myself doing. I was a lifelong journalist up until this point. I started in journalism and sports journalism after I graduated college in 2005. And I was working in sports, and then I transitioned to news, and then I worked in news and sports. And this career carried on for nearly 20 years. It was about 18 and a half to 19 years before I called it quits or took a break. Because I don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, I was going to say, right? Life's short. You don't really know.
Life's short. But yeah, so I was in news and sports, sort of paralleled those two things for my whole career. And so I was on this path, right? I loved it. I was like, I'm going to keep going. You start off in small markets and small towns across the country. You build your way up. Never in my wildest dreams did I see New York City in my future. Did I see working in national television in my future? I was just literally living in the moment of like enjoying this career that I loved so much. And I got back to Philadelphia, which is my hometown, at a young age.
And you're an Eagles fan too, aren't you?
I'm an Eagles fan. Yes, I am.
I'm a Commanders fan, so, we don't have a lot to root for these days, but I'm a big Jalen Hurts fan, so.
No, Jalen Hurts is awesome. Look, I love my team. I bleed green. Whatever color that sports team is that I'm rooting for, whether it be the Phillies, the Sixers, that's what I bleed, the Flyers. But yeah, so I was just on this path where I was like, I love what I'm doing so much. And it was a career where I was like, I feel like I'm making a difference. I feel like I have an impact. I feel like this is important. And I loved it. And then you fast forward to, almost 20 years later, and suddenly I just felt differently about life. And that's when I decided to make these pivots and changes that I've made, which has even sparked this conversation.
What made you decide you wanted to get into journalism? Like, was there one big moment, or was it just something that always interested you?
No, so it's funny. I always say that it found me. So I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. I was one of those people. I was in college. I went to LaSalle University in Philly, and it was my junior year.
My college roommate went to LaSalle before he transferred. Really? So yeah, he has great LaSalle stories.
I wonder if we know each other. We'll have to talk off
Lee Gotch. Call him out. He was my best man.
Okay.
He's a tornado, so you would know him if you saw him.
It's funny. So I was in college. I was a junior in college, and I was like, I need an internship to graduate. What do I want to do? What do I even want an internship in? I had no idea. And by the way, if I rewind a little bit, in high school, I was like the shy, quiet person who like never spoke in class. And that carried through in college. Yeah, I was so quiet. I'm very reserved. I'm very even, I know it's kind of weird to think that because I had a life on television, but I'm super quiet.
Yeah.
I kind of mind my own business. I stick to my corner of the world, and that's kind of what I do. So it was funny that, when I'm trying to figure out what to do with my life. And there was one night, junior year in college, was at a Flyers game with my dad, my brother, and my best friend, Laura. And I saw this guy who was doing in arena hosting, and I was like, that looks fun. I want to do that. So I was like, I'm going to go introduce myself to him and see if I can get an internship, excuse me. And everyone was like, you are not going to do that. Like, you are the quietest person I know. You're not going to go just randomly introduce yourself to someone with a microphone and ask for an internship. And I was like, watch me. And I did.
Bold.
So a week later, I got an internship at what was then known as Comcast Sportsnet, which was a sports network in Philly.
Nice. And how'd that go? Was it everything you thought it would be?
It was amazing. I mean, it's why I carried with that career for so long. So that's why I say it found me, because I was never the person that was like, oh, I have this voice. Oh, I have this passion. Oh, I have this dream. I can be on television. I can do that. I can tell the news and talk about current events. That just was never something that I saw for myself. I guess I lacked the confidence in myself. And so when it found me, I went down that path. I continued with it. I had reporters who would be like, why don't you come out in the field with me, see what it's like? And I'm like, I can do that. And they're like, yeah. I'm like, really? And I will never forget the very first time that I stood in front of a camera to do a stand-up, which was like a 15-second little, like you spit out just a few sentences of words. It took me like 30 tries to get that one stand-up out of my mouth and on camera. I was so bad. Somehow, though, people believed in me, and somehow people saw it and they're like, you should do this. You need to do this. You need to do this. I'm like, I don't know if I can do this. And lo and behold, I ended up doing it for a very long time.
Did you have good mentors?
I had great mentors. There was one mentor. His name was Neil. He was an anchor at Comcast Sportsnet. And there was one day after the show is like 10 o'clock at night or something late at night. And he said to me, he was like, bring your parents down here. He's like, I want to sit down and talk to your parents, because he saw the potential in me. Mm-hmm. And after the show, we all sat in the green room, and he talked to me and he talked to my parents, and he was like, this is a tough business. Like, I see her going far in this. So I want you to know what the reality is of this business. How, as parents, you're going to have to help, support her, what this is going to be like. She's going to have to move to small towns and different markets. Mm-hmm. And if she really wants this, this is what it looks like. And having mentors like that meant the world to me, because suddenly it was like I knew what I was in for. I knew what I was signing up for. And I was like, okay, I'm good with this. But if that conversation didn't happen and other conversations like that, I think it would have been really challenging.
What was it like working in sports? It's a male-dominated kind of space, and being a woman. What's that like covering?
It was awesome. Like, I grew up loving sports. I grew up going to Flyers games with my dad from such a young age. He and I would go. He had partial season tickets, and we'd go, and that would be what we did, and we'd have fun, and I'd have the jerseys, and we'd go to all the carnivals and get the autographs, and so that was the childhood that I had. My dad loved sports. My dad played softball even as an adult in his 40s, and I would go and I'd keep the score. I'd keep the book. So I was like in sports from such a young age. I played many sports. I still do. I golf. And so I've always had this athletic side to me, which was a big part of my life. And growing up around it, then getting to work in sports, it was like you were working in like, I don't know, I'm trying to
playground,
like Disneyland or something. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, it's like this is what you love as a kid, and then you grow up working in it. And so it was amazing to do that. I found, though, after a while, I almost needed more of a challenge, which is why I transitioned to the news side, because I wanted to cover things and talk about things. And not that sports are not important. They're very important. I think
For
sports
sure.
unify people. They bring people together.
100%.
I think sports, I mean, for me, it brought, me and my dad together as a young age. So sports are incredibly important, but I wanted bigger than that. Like I wanted to talk about issues that were going on, and I wanted to learn more, and I wanted to be involved in different things that mattered. And so that's why ultimately I ended up transitioning to news. And then I just kept going back and forth because I'm like, I love them all so much.
Oh, you talk about your dad a lot. What was it like growing up in your household?
Oh, it was awesome. So I'm super close with my family. Mom, dad, I have a younger brother who's 4 years younger than me. And we're all have been my whole life and are still super close. My parents live like 6 minutes away from me currently. My brother lives like 6 minutes the opposite direction from me.
I feel like that's
I'm
a gift and a curse.
It's great. And so, it was amazing growing up with a family like that, and growing up in the suburbs of Philly with Philly, with it being such a historic city, and with the sports teams, everyone being so passionate, if you will.
I was going to say that. I was wondering how you were going to describe that. For people who aren't from Philly, we appreciate the passion that you guys have. But
do you appreciate it or do you hate it? Like, I'm not sure.
DC teams have been so bad. I'm born and bred Washingtonian. So like our teams have been bad for so long. We haven't had a lot to be passionate about. So there's like a little bit of hatred.
The Nationals won the World Series in what, 2019?
But when I grew up, the Nationals weren't here. That was like post my childhood. I grew up a Braves fan, like Chipper Jones, Andrew Jones, all that, John Smoltz. So there's like a little bit of like Philly fans are the most obnoxious fans and like aggressive fans.
But we wear that with pride.
You do. And now, like, the Eagles are killing it. Like, the 76ers got Embiid and doing really well. It's a hate and a love. At least you guys are earning your keep.
But that's how we feel. That's how we, in Philly feel about, like, well, pretty much all the other teams in our conference, right? Like, I have respect for, like, hey, if you guys were to win, like, I'd have respect for it. I wouldn't be rooting for your team. Certainly not. And if we were, the games that we play you
the NFC
twice a season in football, I'm never rooting for you. But I have a lot of friends in DC and in that area, and I'm going to be happy for you. But I'm never going to root for you, So I think that's normal, though, to feel that way about other cities and other teams. Philly, though, just has such a bad rap. Like, our fans.
You guys threw ice at Santa Claus.
It was snowballs.
Okay. There we go.
No, I was truthfully, I wasn't there for that. I have no part of that. But as of late, the interesting thing with Philly sports fans has been like greasing the poles.
Yeah, what's up with the climbing the poles and?
I don't know. It's a Philly thing, right? I don't know. Again, I have not done it. When the Phillies won the World Series in, gosh, what year was it? I'm dating myself now. I want to say like 2010. I could be wrong. Don't quote me on
somewhere
exactly.
Around there.
But in and around that, was it 2010, 2008? Gosh, I'm such a horrible Philly sports fan right now. But anyway, it was when the Phillies won the World Series. I was out on Broad Street with one of my friends. Like, everyone ran out onto Broad Street, right? You see all the crowds flooding the streets. And that was the first time I saw people climbing the poles. And I was like, what is happening right now? It's carried on and it's carried on. And now they grease the poles and it still doesn't stop them. So it's like, I think everyone's just given up on that. Like, they're going to do that. Like, Philly sports fans are they're going to climb the poles. They're going to figure it out. They're going to get up there. They're going to do what they want to do. And that's how they're going to celebrate. Look, as long as it doesn't get like too out of hand, then
don't burn things down.
That's kind of where I stand.
Let's not get violent.
Yeah.
Like, everybody get drunk, have a good time, make it home safely.
Exactly.
You talk about sports being a unifying kind of composition. Tell me about an awesome sport event that you remember that kind of left a mark on you.
Let's see. Well, so I wasn't there when the Eagles won the Super Bowl. I didn't, unfortunately, get a chance to be there and cover it. But I was, at my best friend's house celebrating with the people I love. And then I got a chance to cover, when I worked at Fox, I got a chance to cover the parade, their championship parade.
Oh,
And that was really cool. Like,
that's
I
gotta
think
be.
it would have been really cool to cover the game, of course,
Mhm.
but covering the parade and like being on the art museum steps when Jason Kelsey was in his mummer's
Legend.
outfit. You know what I mean? Like that
Legend.
was just such a cool experience to cover that. So I think that was incredible. This doesn't involve, I don't know if you look, you can argue, I don't know if this is a sport. I have no idea. It's an activity, I guess.
Mhm.
And I didn't cover this. I did this though for a story. I went
Mhm.
skydiving with the Army
Oh,
Golden Knights
that
for a
counts.
story.
That's pretty
Okay,
awesome.
because that's like an extreme, I feel like
Extreme
sport, like
sport.
skydiving.
Yeah.
But so I got to cover that. I got to do that like for a story with Rob Schmidt, who was my co-anchor at the
Mhm.
time when I worked at Fox. And that was really cool. So there's a lot of things I've experienced in, I'll say, like the athletic world, the sports
Mhm.
world, the adventure world. It's really hard to like pinpoint one, but there's a ton of them.
Yeah, at Fox, there were always like concerts going on and like guests coming in and out of the studios. It was an experience. You probably don't remember this. Your first day at Fox was actually my first appearance ever on Fox.
Are you serious?
Yeah, it was because we were both standing kind of off set, getting ready to, you were going on and kind of they were doing the introduction and welcoming you, and I had never gone on national
Oh
TV
my
before,
gosh.
and I was super nervous. And I remember you standing in front of me, and they were getting ready to like announce, and I was like, she looks so calm. And it was like it's a memory that's always stuck with me.
That is hilarious. You know what? I think when you have those moments,
Hmm.
some of them, they like stick in your brain, like it's seared in your brain, right?
Hmm.
For me, like I don't actually even remember the first show. Like that's kind of a blur
Yeah.
to me. It's like, I think it's interesting how you react in those situations, like how you're sitting there, like noticing how I seem calm. I was probably I'm sure I was
Terrified.
so nervous inside.
Terrified.
Like first time for me going on
Hmm.
national television, right? So I'm sure I was so nervous that I was like in my own sort of space and world. Whereas
Yeah.
your nerves, you're like paying attention to everyone around you. It's just like how we react differently as
There was
humans,
no
right?
real prep for it, so I like didn't know how to sit. I'll never forget. Remember how they have like those individual chair couch kind of things, the love seats? I didn't know how to sit in it, so I sat all the way back into the chair and like sank into the chair. And
That's funny.
it was just like awkward, and I had like one of those robot moments where I was having a back and forth with someone, and I just kept saying the same thing over and over and over again. And I was like, "Oh no, when is this going to be over? I'm never coming back. They're never going to have me back on."
But they did.
They did, you know.
See, you did a good job. Here's what because look, we're both in the business of kind
Mhm.
of training and coaching and stuff like that now.
Yeah,
Here's what I always say to people. I'm like, it always feels so much worse than it
it really
actually
does.
is. Like we're always so much in our head. And
Mhm.
that's so normal though. So like the second you realize that that's normal and that it happens to everybody, and the second you can almost feel that like nervous energy, and instead of feeling it as nervousness, feeling it as like, okay, I feel that I'm nervous right now. This is good because
Means you
now I
care.
have that energy that I can translate into like excitement. Do you
Yeah,
know what I mean?
yeah. It's like having 4 shots of espresso, and you're just like ready. You're just ready to go.
I'm ready to go, guys.
Do you still get nervous?
Not really. I think it depends what it is, but
Yeah.
not really. I think that it's been like I had such a long career
Hmm.
sort of being in front of a camera, being in front of people, that now it's every so often.
Yeah.
But I think that's cool though, because someone once said to me, they're like, look, you get very few opportunities in life to do something so cool that you get nervous
Yeah.
for it. Think about it. Cause like in our daily lives, there's nothing really that's like regular that you do that you're getting nervous for, right?
No.
So when you put it in context like that we do so few things, that we get the opportunity to do these cool things where we actually feel those nerves.
You just gave a commencement speech and got an MBA. Congratulations.
Thank you. No more
What was,
tuition and or class.
yeah, right? What was that experience like first giving that commencement speech? I mean, that's a big crowd. It's a lot different than
Yes.
being on TV. I always
Well, it's
remind
true.
people that like when people see us on TV, there's only a couple people in the room. You don't have a
We're
crowd.
talking to an empty room
Yeah.
with a camera that's like pitch black, that like all you're seeing is words or sometimes nothing. So yeah, I think I was a little bit nervous for that, for the commencement speech, but it was very cool. So I will rewind to, I guess, 2020, right?
Yes.
When COVID happened and, you know, the world was shut down for a period of time. I was in Manhattan at that point. I was working at Fox at that point, and I was one of the few people who never worked from home. So a lot of anchors ended up having studios built in their homes. I never had that. So I was one of the few still going into the studio in Midtown Manhattan every single day. And it, on one hand, I was grateful for that because I could keep my routine. And so it kept me kind of doing, like, I wasn't really affected in that sense where I had to adjust to work from home to, oh my gosh, I need to figure out how to do this, how to balance things. I kept to my same routine. And I think that was a serious blessing in disguise for me. But it was weird because being in Times Square, when I would go out there like after shows in the morning. And since I worked early hours, it was like, 8 o'clock in the morning, 7 o'clock in the morning. And I'd be in Times Square and I'd be the only person there. And I'd just be looking around me like, oh my gosh, there was one morning I'll never forget. I filled in on the weekend morning show. So it was like 10 a.m. I was out there and I was the only person there standing in Times Square. And I was watching the lights change from color to color to color. No cars passing. And it was just like a slight breeze. It was like almost like tumbleweeds. It was like apocalyptic.
That's what I was going to say. Did it feel like the end of the world?
It kind of did. And so I'll never forget, like, that is one of those moments in time that is seared in my brain forever. Just watching the lights change, no cars passing, not a person in sight. I didn't go to school in 2020. I ended up going about maybe 8 or 9 months until I had this thought in my brain, right? Because so many people during COVID, when the world was shut down for that period of time, a lot of people started taking classes and going back to school and saying, okay, well, if I'm going to be home, I can utilize this time then to better myself, right? And so that thought was in my brain, but I was still going about my daily life, still in the routine, still going to the office every day. So it wasn't then until 2021, a year later, that this had been on my mind then for about a year. And I was like, you know what? There's something inside me. This isn't going away. I have to follow this. I have to figure out what this is. And so I did. I applied to schools. And at this point, it was summer of 2021. I applied to schools, got into LaSalle, which is where I went for my undergrad. And that was easy for me. I reached out to them. I'm like, hey, what do I have to do? I really want to do this. Got into the program. The online MBA program started that fall. And my first class was Intro to Accounting. And I was like, oh, heck no. There is no way I am going to survive in this.
Starting off with math.
I'm not kidding you, Michael. Like, it became addictive. It became like, it gave me this passion and this purpose and this drive that I had not felt before, because all of my life I put everything into my career. And all of a sudden I was like, oh my gosh, here's this new thing that I'm doing just for myself, right? It felt like the first thing I was doing just for me. And so it became this addictive, like, not only do I want to complete this course, I want to excel at this. I want to know what I'm learning. I want to do well. So I ended up taking 3 years to do the whole MBA program, one class at a time, while working full time, while making major life changes, while then quitting a career. And after 3 years, I got done this program. And I'm not saying this to like brag. I had a 3.84 GPA, which for me was really great, because when I was an undergrad, I think I got like a 3.0. Like, I kind of like phoned it in sometimes, in undergrad.
It's college. You had a little fun.
It's college, And so my point in saying this is it became the most important thing to me.
Yeah.
And I don't know why. Like, I didn't at the time know why, because I was like, it's not like I'm planning at this point on leaving a career. It's not like I'm planning at this point on starting a business, because I wasn't then. It was just in me. It was like this passion and this fuel in me. And so I took so seriously every single class. I wanted to get an A in everything. I wanted to do the best I could. And I did. I think I got 1 B+ in the whole program. I am so proud of myself for what I did.
That's
like
an
when
amazing
people ask me, what are you most proud of? Absolutely, I'm proud of my career. I am proud of everything I did. I think I am most proud at this point in my life of doing that, going through that program, doing it for myself, dedicating the time, like just choosing to grow and choosing to be better and choosing to learn and excel at something and evolve. Because that's like, and actually I'm like tearing up talking about that, because we get one life, right? To do these really cool things. And we have opportunities that we can sit back and we can do the same thing every single day, or we can grow. And that's how I looked at it. Like, one of my favorite quotes now, it's an unknown quote, but it's repeat or what is it? Evolve or repeat.
Yep.
Like, you're given this choice every single day, and you can choose to evolve or you can choose to repeat. And to me, like, that is so profound. And so that's what that time of my life meant to me.
Did people tell you were crazy when
they still do.
I mean,
you don't even have to finish that sentence.
Yeah, right. Well,
but in what
besides
respect?
the haters. Yeah, I mean, right? I mean, you successful local and national anchor, kind of, at a very high point in your career. I guess first I'll start off. What was the moment where you kind of decided that you wanted to at least try something new?
So when I was in New York, I was, working nationally at that point, and I was there for about 4.5, like close to 5 years.
Yeah.
And I knew I was coming up for a contract renewal at the end of that year. And it just, whenever you come up to a point where you have to sort of reflect and decide.
Yeah.
I was reflecting and I knew I had to decide. And I was like, I can keep doing this. And I truthfully, I loved working there. I loved everyone there. I loved my time there. Like, I have zero complaints whatsoever. It was just something inside. And at this point, I had started that journey of going back to school. And I thought, my thought at the time was, well, maybe at some point I'll transition to like business news.
Yeah.
Because, and you know me, like, I don't dive into like super political conversations, but I'll say, like, surface level, I didn't love being involved in like politically charged news. Like, that's what our news, I feel like, has become a lot of it. And there's a lot of opinion. And I knew that wasn't for me.
Yeah.
And so when I looked deep inside, I was like, I think I have an important voice, but I don't believe in giving my opinion on a lot of issues and topics and stuff. And so where do I land then? Like, what does that look like for me going forward? Because our world has become so politically charged. And so I was like, you know what? For whatever reason, it just doesn't feel right. Like, I don't feel right. There's something else I'm supposed to be doing. There's somewhere else I'm supposed to be. And it was really hard to make that decision, because I had a great opportunity.
Yeah.
And I had great people that I worked with, and like, from the outside looking in, like, people were like, this is the best. Like, what? You're a national anchor. You know what I mean? Like, why would you ever leave that? Like, you're nuts. And I get it. Like, I still look at that and I'm like, yeah,
biggest viewership, you got salary, you get, all the perks that come along with it.
Yes, I know. I know, it's crazy, but it was internal. Like, it was something internal. And I was like, you know what? I was getting to a point in my life where I was like, I want to put more value on my personal life, on my personal time. And working in the news industry full time, like, it's a grind, and I don't complain about it. I don't sit here and say like, oh, feel sorry, like, no, it is a privilege to have those jobs. But there's a lot that comes with it, right? And there are other industries where you make these sacrifices too, where you're giving up holidays, you're giving up time with your family, you're giving up schedules, you're giving up, personal things So it's not the only industry where that happens. There's a lot of them. Healthcare is another example. But I just got to a point where I was like, I've been on overnights 15 years. Like I've spent 15 years going to bed at 6 p.m., waking up at midnight through my 20s, 30s. At that point I was late 30s. So mid 20s to late 30s, I was like, I haven't done anything for myself. And so it was just all internal. It was this whole, there's something else and I'm supposed to be somewhere else. So I came back home to Philly, worked locally in news for a bit, and I still felt it.
Yeah.
And I had serious thoughts for about like 3 years. I was like, I just value myself and my worth and my time and my personal life, like so much more at this stage in life than the job right now. So that was ultimately where it came from.
Talk to me about the kind of the heaviness in terms of like just the mental health of covering COVID, covering the Las Vegas shooting. I know for me, consistently being in politics and being in newsrooms, being in green rooms and hearing the stories all the time, having to stay up on all of the news of the day so you can go talk about it whenever, the phone rings. It's heavy. It wears on you. And especially during COVID, it was, it got me at certain points. What was that like for you?
It is really hard. There's a lot of stories that I definitely take home and think about. There's a lot of super tragic stories that I've covered in my career that still get me. If I talk about them, like I will still get emotional about them. Like the Las Vegas shooting was, that was difficult. Like we actually had, I think all networks had reporters on the ground, like when it happened, because there was something else going on. There was
the music. Something. Yeah, there was a big, I think either the Black Journalists Association, one of the conferences was there.
There was a conference going on. So like there were reporters out there. So I ended up going out the very next morning, like hours after it happened. And I spent a week out there. And, they are important stories to cover, right? Like everything that happens in our society, in our world, like it is important. It is a very important job, but we're also human beings, And so when you're interviewing family members who lost their loved ones, or you're having to knock on their door, it definitely takes a toll mentally. But you go back on that, your journalistic standards are, these are important things that, someone has to do that job. And so you sort of find your strength from that through your journalistic standards. And that was the same that I felt about COVID and every other story that I covered. Especially during COVID, like let's see what summer, it was the summer of 2020. COVID was happening. The George Floyd protests were going on. There was looting going on and riots all across, cities in the country. And I stepped back and I was like, I need to get this right.
Yeah.
I need to be responsible. I need to educate myself even more than I'm educated right now. So what I did that summer, I spent that summer actually talking to people who I am close with, from either, different political sides or just different ways of growing up, or just, people I trusted. I was like, can I sit down and have a conversation with you like we've never had before?
Wow.
And there's a photographer at Fox. I sat down outside my apartment in Weehawken, New Jersey, overlooking the Hudson, and we talked for 3 hours about things that were going on in our country, because I wanted to get perspectives from every single side so that I could be fair and that I could be responsible. And so I took journalism very seriously. And that's an honor, right? To have a job where you have that responsibility. So I loved my time doing that. It was a true honor and a true privilege. But at the same time, I just got to a point where I was like, I care about me right now first.
Yeah. What do you think is the biggest misconception about reporting and about kind of, everybody sees the TV and in front of the camera, but like, I think about Fox and Friends first. I know what time I had to get there. I think the car would come to Jersey City or Hoboken at like 3:30 in the morning or so that I could get to set by 4:15. And like you talked about Times Square, like my favorite time was 4:30 in the morning at Times Square. Before the show would come on, I'd put in headphones and just go walk and just kind of zone out. Like what do you think viewers don't see that they'd be interested in?
I think that, well, first of all, everybody thinks it's so glamorous, and there are parts of it that are, surely.
Yeah.
I mean, the hair, the makeup, like, you
The
get
car
to wear
rides.
fun clothes. Yeah. Like, yeah, sure. Like, that's sure. But that's like a small part of it.
Yeah.
There's so much on the back end that, like, so much work that you do. Like, I tell people this and they're like, oh my gosh, like for real. I had at one point in time 3 or 4 suitcases packed, ready to go for breaking news at all times.
Go
I
bag.
kept one in my office. I kept one in my apartment in Weehawken. I kept one at my parents' house outside of Philly because when I come home on the weekends, I'd stay with them sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there at one point might have been like one in the trunk of my car. Like, so I took my job so seriously that like you're always on.
Yeah.
Right. And especially when you get to a level like national news, you go out to dinner and you see this with celebrities. And I'm not saying that news anchors are celebrities. I'm just using this as an example.
You're a very
of
recognizable person.
Like,
yeah.
You see, so like you're always on. You're always representing a company. You're always representing a brand. Like you're everything in your life. Like you have to think about that. It has to be in the back of your mind. At least for me, it always was. Maybe everyone doesn't feel the same way, but it always was for me. So there's been something a little bit freeing as of late where I'm like, I don't have to think about this. I don't have to worry about this. I'm just going to do what I want. I'm going to cut my hair. Like, you could
just live.
There's a little bit of a freedom in that sense. But so I think there's a misconception that it's all like glamorous, that you just show up and that people do everything for you and you just show up and the lights go on and the camera goes on and then you're done. You work like 3 hours a day. You're working like every hour a day, basically.
Yeah. What's the crew like? Because I think one of the things that people were always surprised is I loved everybody behind the camera. Like they're just there's nobody talks about like Democrat, Republicans, like with the like camera operators and boom people. And, just from the minute I would walk in the door until I walked out, like people were always so kind, so nice. It didn't matter kind of where you were on the political ideology.
Yep.
And I always thought that was really amazing.
So I will say that, like that 100% the experience, like when I was at Fox, like they are the best people. Like, I mean, from literally everybody you just mentioned, like hair and makeup to the floor, the stage managers, who are on the floor, with you in the studio, to like those in the control room, like everybody at that level. Like, I think when you get to that level, it's like, okay, like this is cool. We've all worked really hard to get here. Like, let's do it. Locally, it's not always that like that. I will say that. Local news is a little different. Local news can be its own little beast. Local news can be a little more catty, can be a little more interesting in that sense.
I've always actually wondered about that.
That's like, as far as I'll go with that.
Well, like having worked in Philly and your family being in Philly, like, what's it like having your family see you on TV?
Oh, they loved it. Like my dad would take any opportunity to be like, that's my daughter. And I'd always be like, Dad, my mom would be like, Tom, like, come on, but they're so proud. I mean, it's the same way that, your family members probably say the same thing about you when you're on air. It's like, oh my God, there he is. I saw you today. And like, they tell everyone, it's awesome.
I was super close to my grandfather. And towards like the end, he was still lucid and we were at a restaurant. Actually, it was the day that Kobe Bryant passed away. So we're at this restaurant. The crash happens. I'm getting calls about going on TV to talk about it. And he leaned over to the table next to us and goes, my grandson's going to be on TV later today. And goes, what time? And I was like, leave them alone. Let them have like brunch or whatever. He's like, no, they need to know. And I was like, 5 o'clock. He goes, okay. And I was like, leave people alone. Let them be. He's like, no, people need to know that someone who looks like them is on TV. It's important. And it was like it reminds me of like representation and just in general, how far, things have come.
Yeah. No, I love that. And when you're in it, it's like, oh, like stop. You don't need to tell everybody.
Yeah.
But you think back on those moments and it's like that is such a source of pride, for him and now for you. Like that's special. That's like a really special moment.
It is. I think we kind of get numb to it after a while. We get so used to going on TV, which even it feels like a weird thing for me to say because I still look at myself as like the dorky kid who like skipped school and watched CNN on the couch or like was obsessed with Meet the Press at like 9 years old because that's what my grandfather watched. Like
that's funny.
I think we kind of forget the coolness of it all after a while. And so yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I think it's funny too, because like so as you know, like I started a podcast last fall, which has been on break and I'm picking it back up at some point soon. And when I started it, like my parents were like, so how do I listen to, like, how do I find this?
Yep.
Because, they were able to always just like click, turn on the TV and find me and watch. And so they're like, how do I do this? And I like, so it's like, it's kind of cute because they still are proud and they still want to follow and like, they still want to like enjoy and tell people and share it with them. And
they just love us no matter what.
It's cool. Yeah, absolutely.
So talk to me about the pivot to entrepreneurship.
Where do I begin? So, right. So like I said, I got to that point where I was just like, you know what? I value me at this point in my life more. And I don't sit here and say like, I'm done with TV forever. I don't like it.
Yeah, who knows?
No, that's not the case. I have no idea what the future will bring. I know where I am in life that I want to do what matters to me. And so I don't think I'll ever go back to TV full time. I love what I'm doing now where I coach people for presentation skills and public speaking skills. I mentor a lot of college students. And what's been really interesting about that, so I started this entrepreneurial journey in April of 2023. So a little more than a year now at this point, 15 months or so. And a lot of my clients in that time have been, executives. And again, like I said, college students that I've been mentoring. There's a professor actually from Notre Dame who he sends me a few students every semester. I work with them. I've gone out there a few times to speak to his classes.
Oh, wow.
And I love that. But the intersection of these two age groups has been interesting. And that leads to what I have done as of late. And so I have found that like our generation and above, it's just a different world than what the younger generation is growing up with because they're the first fully online, fully digital world. Like Facebook didn't become a thing until I was, I think, a junior or senior in college.
Yeah, I was a freshman or sophomore. So yeah, that makes sense.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I got my first cell phone the Christmas after I turned 16. I remember opening it and looking at my parents and being like, what do you want me to do with this? And they're like, it's for emergencies. Keep it in your car. I'm like, what? Like nowadays, if you're like 5 and don't have a cell phone, I feel like that's like unheard of, right? So point being is there's this weird gap right now where the worlds aren't colliding in certain senses. And so when I say this, like a lot of executives, and I'm not going to name because they've been clients, so I'm never going to, so keep it confidential. However, a lot of them have been complaining about the younger generation, like when they come in for job interviews, how they're behaving, what they're doing, what they're not doing, how they're not showing up. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So this is I'm tuned in now to like what's going on, right? So when I mentor these college students, I'm like, talk to me about this. So I found this gap where I'm like, communication is not happening here in this sense, right? And so I just launched an online course for professional soft skills. And so this, again, was never in the cards for me. Like a year ago, you couldn't have said to me, oh, you're going to launch this online course for soft skills. I'd be like, what are you talking about? So I've been following this journey and this like intuition and sort of just this path of seeing where it takes me. And I woke up one day in March and I was literally like bounced out of bed and I was like, I know what I need to do. I know I need to create this course. Like I see what's missing. I need to do this. Like I need to be the one to do this. And Michael, it's been so cool to be able to follow that freedom of, wherever this path takes you, like that's where it takes you. And I couldn't have done that in journalism because like you're sort of held to this like strict,
Yep.
This is your show or this is your schedule or these are your hours.
This is
So
your
I'm
lane.
just living life like wherever it takes me right now. But the thing is, I'm finding like I'm so much more passionate about all of these things and I'm getting to put like my thumbprint on, my stamp on,
How does it feel being in control? Yeah, I looked at, you had a post the other day, which I thought it was about how people are ghosting employers for interviews.
Yeah.
And I got to admit, I had never really thought about it before. I don't think I've ghosted anyone on an interview, but like when I saw that, I was like, wow, I really have to think about that. Like, have I? What's it been like being able to kind of dive into such interesting and like human experiences?
It's really cool. Well, it's not cool that people are ghosting job interviews. So, for instance, I have a close family friend who she was interviewing candidates for a job last week, and she was literally had 10 candidates that she was interviewing in one day. 8 of them did not show up.
Wow.
8 out of 10. 80% of candidates in one day did not show up. There were no shows for the interview. Like that is unheard of to me because industries are so small. You know this, right? The TV industry, the media industry, it seems so large, but it's so small. So when you're ghosting job interviews and not showing up for interviews, people will talk. Like that is not good. Like
No.
you're starting then not from the starting line. You're starting from behind then. So that's why I'm like, I don't get that. So it's been amazing because of my news background, I can see what's going on. I can read the articles. I can watch the news and, see what they're covering. I mean, if you literally Google like ghosting job interviews, there will be probably hundreds of articles that come up. If you Google, Gen Z and job interviews, hundreds of articles will come up. So there's just this gap right now. Like there's this disconnect. And so because I have that ability through all of my time in news to sort of go through all this, make an educated sort of discernment on this, like, okay, like I'm going to be researched. I'm going to have all these facts and to be able to do something about it and to be able to create something that has the opportunity to reach so many people, I think is very special and very cool. And I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be and I'm doing exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. So whether or not this is something that works out, I have no idea, but I feel like this is where I'm supposed to be.
Yeah.
Like
I feel like no matter what, you're learning so much. It's an experience. Question, are people really bringing their parents to job interviews? I keep seeing like these headlines. Like, is it that, like parents are driving because like kids aren't getting their driver's licenses anymore? Or like they really bring in parents?
That's a good question. So I mean, truthfully, I'm not the expert because I'm not the one, right? Like I'm not the executive interviewing. However, I have had many conversations with executives who are. Some of them have experienced that. I haven't gone as far as to say, well, are they actually coming in with them or are they just dropping them off? Most of them complain about the things like ghosting. Most of them complain about the soft skills of not being able to hold conversations, about not asking the right questions, about, here's the thing, every resume and cover letter looking and sounding the same because of AI. There are great advancements and great things that AI is bringing to us. But one of the downfalls is a lot of young adults right now and or just job seekers in general, like you can go in and say like, oh, here's my name, here's my background, like write me a resume. They all look the same and employers are noticing. So that's a problem right now.
That's a big problem.
Executives will look at resumes and cover letters and just know like this is AI generated because they all look the same. So I'm hearing these complaints like time after time after time again. And that's why I'm like, huh. And so with this online course that I created, and we don't have to spend too much time on this, but I think it's important to mention with this course, I brought in 3 CEOs as panelists and I host it because I wanted people to hear directly from them, like what they're seeing and what they're noticing and what needs to change and how people can avoid these pitfalls that they think they're doing something, let me just go on to, ChatGPT or whatever and create my resume. But unfortunately, it comes back to bite you because that's being noticed, that's what's happening and that's how it was generated. It's actually super interesting, I think.
It is really interesting. Where can people find the seminar?
Thank you. Skill Studio courses. So skillstudiocourses.com. And the goal is to have more courses on there.
Yeah.
So there's another one in the works.
What do you wish someone had told you when you were first getting into the business?
It comes to entrepreneurship. I had people saying to me, oh, it's going to take you about a year. It's going to take you about a year. It's going to take you about a year. I heard that a lot. And I was like, oh, no, I'll be fine. I can figure this out.
I got this.
What I didn't know was that in that year, and by the way, it did take me about a year to sort of get to a place where I really figured out, where I feel comfortable sitting here saying to you, I'm where I'm supposed to be. I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
I couldn't have said that 6 months ago. So it took me about a year to feel that confidence in what I'm doing and to know that I'm on the right path. But what I didn't know was truly how many ups and downs and self-doubts I would have had along the way. It was a hard financial year, right? Like I made so much less money last year than I've made in years. That's not easy, but I was prepared for that. But you have ups and downs, you have self-doubt that creeps in, you have questions, you have, oh my gosh, did I make a mistake? Like all those thoughts, I didn't prepare myself for all of them.
People see the kind of glossy, finished, nice product, but how scared were you doing this? Like, how scary has this process been?
It is to some extent. And even though I had those self-doubts and those like, oh my gosh, those fears, I still always at the end of the day had confidence in me because I got to a point in my life where I had the confidence that even if I failed, I would figure it out, that I was going to be okay.
So last question, you seem really happy now. What does happiness mean to you?
So for me, when I left national news and I came back to Philly for that year and a few months and I was working in local news still, but I was still in news. For the first time in my life, like I had like heart palpitations. I was having like panic or anxiety attacks or something. I never experienced that, right? So there was one night, it was like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. And I woke up out of a sound sleep because I felt like my heart was beating out of my chest so much that I felt like it was like touching the ceiling in my room. And I woke up and I was just so, like I couldn't breathe. And I called my mom, who's a nurse. She's in medicine. So I'm like, I can't breathe. Like, I don't know what's going on. And she's like calm down. Like, you just like deep breaths. Like, let's slow down. Like, she calmed me down on the phone. And that was a pivotal moment for me because I was like, I am not okay. This is not okay. I need to focus on myself. I need to step away. And so having that feeling to like a year and a half almost later where I am now, and what I think of like happiness and what that means to me, it means so many things, but it means self-assessment, self-reflection, right? Recognizing those feelings that I was having and being able to listen to them, because a lot of times like we feel certain things or we think certain things, we tuck it away and we're like, oh, I can't do that, or oh, I can't take that leap of faith, or oh, but what about how am I going to pay the bills, or how am I going to get a paycheck? Or like for me, being so self-reflective that I felt these things, that I recognized these things, that I reflected on them, and that I did something about it, and that I built up the courage and the confidence to jump off that cliff for my own personal freedom, for my own personal happiness, to be able to spend holidays with my family. Like I have a boyfriend who is wonderful. Like for so many years, like I just couldn't meet someone. And I like, look, you go to bed at 6 p.m. I mean, you can't even go to dinner, and he's so wonderful. And like, I'm so close to my family, like proximity wise and relationship wise, and just all of those things. Like I did that for me. And so that's my happiness, is to be able to like feel these things, experience these things, reflect on them, and reflect on those feelings and feel those feelings of fear and all that stuff. And to then be like, you know what? I'm doing it. And
I gotta say, I've known you for years. You were so kind to me when I was getting started out in front of the camera, but especially behind the camera. Like, it can be a scary world getting started, and just like little things of when you walk by, you always say hi and check in on me and stuff like that. And it just really said a lot about who you were.
Thank you.
And so I just want to let you know, I appreciate you, and watching you like succeed and do new things and just genuinely be happy. It like means all the world. And I'm so happy for you.
Thank you. Back at you though. I mean, seriously, I'm tearing up. Like, I didn't plan on crying.
I gotcha.
Jeez. No, it's interesting. Like, the relationships you form with people, and you know, when you were in the studios, right, in New York, like, it's, you know, as a guest, when you come on the show, like, you get a few minutes like in a break, and we're like, oh, hey, how are you? Okay, here's what we're talking about, you know, boom, boom, boom. And then the show goes on, and like, you kind of go about like your life, and it's like that hamster wheel, right? But being able to keep relationships, and even years later say like, hey, how are you? You know, like, let's catch up. Like, what's going on? Like, that's what's special about relationships, and that I've tried to put more of a focus on now that I have the time, now that I'm off that hamster wheel of being so solely focused on work, is like personal relationships and friendships, and even having conversations like this, like, so life's about.
Yeah.
You know,
it matters.
And I think we need to be aware of making more time for that.
Where can people find you on social media and all those kinds of fun / torturous places?
Yes, it depends on the moment in the day, how I feel about them. No, they're great. Jillian Mele is my name. So I think all my handles are different, unfortunately, but Instagram, Jillian B. Mele. I have a website, jillianbmele.com, and skillstudiocourses.com. And, you know, you can just Google. They can ask you, and you can send them.
We'll put a nice little link at the bottom. Jillian,
Thank you.
Are awesome. I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you. I appreciate it, and I appreciate your friendship.
Oh, absolutely. Thanks for being with me today. Share this episode with others, like and review it, and please keep learning all you can so that you can make an informed voting decision this year. Come back next week for more Truth in Politics. I'm Michael Starr Hopkins, and this is It Matters.